Anyway, first, man, oh man, what a week it's been. Within the last 24 hours, we had the extraordinary spectacle of Joe Biden delivering a halting address to the nation that left us no wiser as to why he was stepping back from the race. Was it health? Was he heavied by Democratic power brokers? Was he offered a fishing trip with Al Neary? Who knows? Who can say? The most we got was this, which sounded as hoarse as a bad impersonation of Don Corleone.
I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation.
But he did tell, as his wont, plenty of lies. Joe Biden said the nation was stronger, more prosperous, and more secure under his watch. Really? He said that the American economy was the strongest in the world. Okay, and again, that's fine as long as you're not a wage earner experiencing stagnant salaries and soaring inflation. And he even claimed that border crossings were lower than when he took office. Okay, then. I also note that his makeup artists seem to coat him in some sort of orange powder, which I suppose is further proof of the idea that one must choose one's enemies carefully because eventually one becomes them. Anyway, it was kind of amazing, or maybe not, that there were no mass fact checks of his speech in the Washington Post or CNN. That stuff's for the other guy. But anyway, in a way, it doesn't matter now, does it? Because Kamala Harris is now all but coronated as the Democrat Party nominee. No pre-selection. The convention is being stitched up right now as we speak. Because, hey, what's 14 or 15 million primary votes when democracy is on the line? Again, who needs pesky things like primaries, right? And gosh, you can really feel the excitement building for Kamala. Take it away, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Now that the process has played out, from the grassroots bottom up, we are here today to throw our support behind Vice President Kamala Harris. I'm clapping. You don't have to.
You can clap too. Go ahead, go ahead. Anyway, shades of old Jeb Bush there, but here's the funny thing about Kamala Harris being the presumptive nominee, and no, it doesn't have anything to do with Venn diagrams or yellow school buses. There's a lot more besides that to be worried about with our new friend that goes behind the old goofy Xanax ant routine. Let me give you some highlights, although by far not a definitive guide, to why the world should be very, very worried indeed about the prospect of a President Kamala Harris. Not the least of which is that she is opportunistic, without principle, and wholly marinated in hard left radical ideology. Here's some things you know that have nothing to do, as I say, with her goofy public persona. In 2020, in the midst of the Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots that torched downtowns across the U.S., Kamala Harris, who is about to run for president on her tough record as a prosecutor, backed the rioters in.
They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And this is a movement, I'm telling you. They're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not. And
She also told people to donate to a bail fund for protesters that put murderers, yes, murderers, back on the street. It was all very weird, but I guess she was seeing this through the lens of trying to tack left from how she behaved when she was a prosecutor in California, when she was accused of all sorts of misconduct. Misconduct which provided the fodder for one of the great moments of the 2020 campaign when Tulsi Gabbard ended Harris's dreams of the nomination in just a minute in this debate right here.
Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Then in the Biden administration, she was the border czar who never visited the border, though now they're denying she was ever border czar at all.
This whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making.
And she made a real specialty out of foreign policy.
So the United States shares a very important relationship, which is an alliance with the Republic of North Korea. And it is an alliance that is strong and enduring.
The late Henry Kissinger had absolutely nothing on her when it came to an understanding of geopolitics and world affairs.
Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically, that's wrong.
Geopolitics for two-year-olds, there you go. More generally, though, Kamala is a huge fan of something called equity, which sounds nice, but is just a sort of gussied-up HR version of communism that means equality of outcomes for everyone, not in the Democratic elite, of course.
It's about giving people the resources and the support they need so that everyone can be on equal footing and then compete on equal footing. Equitable treatment means we all end up at the same place.
We all end up at the same place. Yes, the breadline. That means, of course, woe to you if you're white and middle class and, say, just happen to be hit by a natural disaster.
It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions. So we have to address this in a way that is about giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place.
And, of course, speaking of race, Kamala Harris was among the first to jump on the Jussie Smollett hoax, calling it a modern-day lynching. No surprise, despite an upbringing in posh suburbs, Kamala can also put on a patronizing racial act to try and get out the black vote that makes Hillary Clinton look downright genuine.
VP, I know you've been traveling across the country. What are you hearing?
Yeah, girl, I'm out here in these streets.
We out in these streets, my word. Anyway, look, this is far from an exhaustive list. Kamala Harris also supported the Green New Deal, health care for illegal immigrants. The list goes on and on and on. But here's the thing. I also think that if anybody from the Trump campaign is listening, focusing on this stuff is the road to victory. Go hard on her policies, the things she has said and done, and don't bother with the silly behavior, which weirdly is a lot of fun, but just makes her more attractive to certain voters. Instead, the point that they need to make is that Kamala Harris has morphed and changed to suit the times and her lust for power, and that is what makes her truly sinister.